The story for the power of the supplier is essentially equivalent to the power of the buyer. The more concentrated the suppliers are vis-a-vis the buyers, the more they can exert influence. The more the buyer depends on the supplier's product, the more influence, namely the main, in the terms of price, that suppliers can extract. And you also have the idea of the forward integration for the supplier. If the business is too attractive, will decide, hey, I think I would like to enter that market myself, and becomes a competitor. Let me give you an example of how supplier power affects a company that probably most of you are familiar with. Netflix. What does Netflix do? Well, they're the middleman in terms of streaming content. That content is supplied by the various media companies that give them rights to the movies and the TV shows and the like that are streamed on Netflix. And every so often, you'll see some very tense negotiations between Netflix and the various studios as they license their libraries to them. Obviously, to the extent that the supplier is able to raise the price that Netflix has to pay for access to that library, it reduces the profits. And as to the extent that more people begin to threaten Netflix, for example, the Amazon streaming and the like, the more that there will be a competition for content and people will pick streaming services based on the content they have, then they're going to end up paying the suppliers more for the most desirable content. On to the next topic, substitute products. This is more of the indirect competitors, and this is the subtle stuff, or you can almost say kind of the sucker punch that comes out of nowhere and taps into Andy Grove's paranoia, because this is somebody you may not have seen coming, or you may have seen coming. Often what defines substitute products is they are another way to scratch the itch of the customer. So let's give some examples. Restaurant industry. What's a substitute product for restaurant industry? Well, it depends to a certain extent on how you frame the value of a restaurant. Is it primarily a source of food? Well, if so, then obviously grocery stores are a competitor, and you can see how grocery stores have kind of moved into the middle ground with the, for example, Market Street here in Wichita Falls, where they have a wonderful place to buy prepared foods and sit and eat. They kind of straddle that middle ground. If, on the other hand, you view restaurants as more of an experience, in other words, back in my single days when I was taking girls on dates, you'd want to take them to a nice restaurant. Well, then it's more of an entertainment venue, and there are a lot of other entertainment venues that perhaps could satisfy my need to impress this lady. Airline industry. What substitutes for an airline industry? If you are a vacation traveler, that would be driving your car, riding the bus, taking the train, because as a vacation traveler, you've got to get there. If I'm a business traveler, it might be WebEx or something like that, so that now I can conduct my business through some other means than traveling face to face. And so you can bet as WebEx and this teleconferencing has gotten better, that's put pressure on the airlines vis-a-vis their business travelers. The NFL. What substitutes for an in-stadium experience for the NFL? They're worried about that. They now think these big screen, high-def TVs provide such an engaging experience that they're worried about continuing to attract people to the stadium. So here's the effect of substitute products on profitability. What has the NFL had to do? They've had to upgrade their stadium experiences. And the biggest example of that is Jerry Jones's huge TV screen in AT&T Stadium. And so that's to try to make the stadium experience at least on par, in that you can see the replays, you can see the action in very high, to great detail. So people are spending money to counter the rise of the substitute product, and that's where profitability gets damaged. Last, and probably most, well, I don't want to say most important, often the place that the force that will cause companies to lose a lot of profit is the rivalry among the competitors. So let's talk about when the rivalry is most likely to become a drain on profitability. Little degree of differentiation among the products, that becomes then a price war or a service war. Low switching cost goes hand in hand with the lack of differentiation. Numerous / equally balanced competitors. And what this says is there is a lack of an 800-pound gorilla in the industry to enforce what is kind of tacit collusion. So let's imagine, for example, that you have one or two major competitors that dominate the industry and a lot of competitors on the periphery that they allow to exist. And one of those little competitors comes in and initiates a price war. What does the 800-pound gorilla do? You want a price war? I'll give you a price war, little fella. Bang! And they slash their prices by 40%. And all these little players are going, we can't compete, and we don't have the big pockets to survive, and we're going to die. And then shortly before they kill them, the 800-pound gorilla raises their prices again. And again, this is all very tacitly done, no active collusion. The message is, do that again, and I will kill you. And everybody goes, got it, Mr. or Miss Big, we won't do these things again. So when you don't have somebody to enforce discipline, then you're more likely to see the various wars. Slow industry growth, now they're fighting over a fixed pie. Then the last things are a scenario of I have no other place to go. This is a market I can't fail in. For one, high strategic stakes, high fixed costs. This is why GM and Ford for many years were selling cars at a loss. Every car they sold, they lost money on it. You go, that's stupid. How could they do that? Well, the reality was they lost even more money if they didn't produce the car and sell it at a loss. That had to do with their fixed costs. And then high exit barriers. I have nowhere else to go. My assets are not worthwhile. So the U.S. airline industry, at one point, over 50% of the seats flying across the United States on any given day in the mid-2000s, over 50% of them were flown by an airline that was in bankruptcy. How can that be? Where did they get the money to keep operating if over half of them were in bankruptcy? All these people that had loaned the airlines the money to buy the airplanes, they knew that if even one of those airlines shut down operation and tried to liquidate its fleet of airliners, they weren't going to be worth that much money. And so they gave them the money to keep them going so that in hopes down the line they would be able to regain some profitability. You see this sort of stuff happen all the time. And you can imagine how the drain on profitability comes around. But let me give you one example. And it may be a function of the fact that I watch a lot of sports shows, or mainly sports shows, specifically football games. But it is staggering to me how much money the insurance companies spend on advertising. We've got the Aflac Duck. We've got the Geico Gecko. We've got Flo. We've got Nationwide and a whole host of bad singers. If you go back and look 10 years ago, most of these insurance companies weren't advertising on a national scale like they do at all. It's so bad that even my insurance company, USAA, which is very much a niche insurance company, is buying spots on NFL programs. Frankly, I'm kind of offended. I don't know that they're spending that money well. But you can see that all of that money that could have been in industry profitability is instead going to the advertising agencies and the TV outlets, because here's the question. Did all that advertising grow the pie? Are more people buying insurance today than would have without it? That's probably pretty questionable. The Aflac Duck is trying to get you to buy something that's a little bit different. But all those car companies, or all those companies selling car insurance and life insurance and home insurance, they probably haven't grown the pie, nor have they shifted the distribution of the pie very much, probably. They're all just fighting to keep what they've got, and the beneficiaries are the TV. Come back in the last video and we'll sum up this discussion of Porter's 5 forces.